Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this per boxing scribe, Jamie James. DAZN and Foxtel. DAZN is now in the final stages of purchasing News Corp's 65% stake in the Australian pay-TV broadcaster Foxtel. The deal, which would be concluded by early next year at the latest, will make DAZN a major player in the Aussie market. DAZN is finally getting a leg up in the land down under in Australia. We know that Matchroom signed a good number of Aussie fighters. Ebony Bridges, Sky Nicholson.
Yeah, but Ebony's gone.
Well, they still have Sky Nicholson. They still have Justice Hooney, Liam Paro, Jai Opataya. They still have a stake in that Aussie boxing scene.
Even though they've only done one show there.
So this will allow Matchroom and DAZN to do and broadcast even more shows in the land down under, but perhaps pick up some talent as well. Attract those Aussie fighters to the platform, to the banner. I wonder if Tim Tszyu won't pair himself up with them.
Doesn't Foxtel broadcast his fights and distribute them in Australia?
Wheels are in motion. This is all part of a rumor that Matchroom has signed former unified lightweight champion George Cambodia, and he's going to be making his Matchroom debut in February in Australia.
Sky Nicholson is supposed to be boxing on that show.
Who else?
Shernika Johnson is supposed to be boxing on that show.
That's what brings us here, what brings us back to this subject, Matchroom's movements in the land down under, that reigning WBA bantamweight champion Shernika Johnson will be making her ring return on the undercard of this show. Opposite the ring, former champion Nina Hughes, who she won the belt from in what will be their rematch. So from the time they last fought, which was in May of this year, till February of next year, well, that is less than a year. That it will have taken less than a year's time to get them back in the ring with each other, though overall, both Shernika and Nina have only fought once this calendar year. Just once, and that was their fight.
So there still is lost time to account for.
Shernika Johnson sports a professional record of 16 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 6 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 18 professional bouts. Newly crowned WBA bantamweight champion that will be making her first defense of the title against the woman that she won it from.
Nina Hughes
Sports professional record of 6 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 7 professional bouts. Less fights overall, much less fights than Shernika Johnson.
The irony
That Nina Hughes is approximately 13 years older than Shernika Johnson, but she's less experienced than Shernika in the paid ranks. You would have thought the older fighter would be the more experienced fighter. That's not the case.
Funny old game, this boxing.
And that's not all in terms of irony. You will remember that Nina Hughes briefly was a Matchroom fighter boxing on the DAZN platform, but her stay there didn't last very long. She eventually jumped ship, paired up with Lou DiBella, and she wasn't boxing on DAZN anymore.
Her very first fight off platform was the Shernika Johnson fight that she lost.
Just for her to end up back on DAZN, and just for her next fight to be on a Matchroom show again.
The irony.
Because remember, this is all supposed to go down on the undercard of George Kambosos' Matchroom debut. Except now, Nina's not a Matchroom fighter, and I don't think Shernika Johnson is either, but she could be.
What?
We'll get to that. So Nina Hughes only boxed once last year, only once this year, and she's set to return early next year. I don't like her chances. I didn't like her chances ahead of the fight. I picked Shernika to beat her, and I'm picking Shernika Johnson to beat her again.
The only difference between then and now is now you're older. Now, more time has passed.
Doesn't favor the older fighter. When you think about what the circumstances are, not much has changed. It's just more time has passed. You're still older than Shernika. You still got a fighter in Australia, except that now she's the champion and you're the challenger, and perhaps none of this would have happened if you hadn't have left Matchroom. That if you would have stayed there, you never would have got trucked off to Australia, been the away fighter.
Live and learn.
I don't think it's going to work out for Nina against Shernika. I think Shernika's going to beat her again, and maybe if she does, Matchroom will sign her.
That's a distinct possibility.
Remember that when Matchroom signed Ebony Bridges to a promotional pact, she was older then than Shernika Johnson is now, and remember that when they signed Ebony, she wasn't a world champion.
That didn't happen until later on.
Whereas Shernika Johnson is a champion already. She's a champion here today. A 2-division champion, having reigned at 122 and currently at 118. So there's more reason to sign her. She's got more upside.
You can get more out of her. It was always a race against the clock with Ebony Bridges because she was already up there in age.
Stands to reason that if you were able to sign Ebony under those circumstances, you can sign Shernika under these. While she may not be as known internationally as Ebony, in the Land Down Under, she has appeared on 1 or 2 very big shows. The Suzy Q fight on the undercard of Haney versus Kambosos, the Nina Hughes fight on the undercard of Lomachenko versus Kambosos.
Be a good addition to the stable.
If what you plan to do is more Aussie shows moving forward, Shernika Johnson would be a welcome addition. A distinct possibility should she take care of business in the Nina Hughes rematch, and I think she's going to. I think she's going to beat her again.
We'll see. Early next year.
In men's lightweight news, Keyshawn Davis has revealed he will be fighting WBO lightweight world champion Dennis Berinchyk next. Davis told ESPN's The State of Boxing, "I'm not going to drop the location, but Dennis Berinchyk is my next opponent." You wonder that they don't bring that fight to Keyshawn Davis's hometown like they did his last fight based on the turnout. A lot of people showed up and showed out for Keyshawn. Will Dennis Berinchyk travel there, or will it be at a more neutral location? Dennis Berinchyk, 19-0 with 9 KOs, newly crowned WBO champion as of his last fight with Emmanuel Navarrete.
Of the Ukraine.
One of many Ukrainian champions we've seen in the sport the last couple of years, the more famous two, Vasyl Lomachenko and Oleksandr Usyk, the lesser-known Oleksandr Vazhdik, and now Dennis Berinchyk is the latest
WBO champion.
He's going to be facing young Keyshawn Davis, a sports professional record of 12-0 with 8 KOs. Seems a bit soon to put him in a title fight, but he thinks he's ready, and a lot of other people do, so here we are. Does he have the right base style for the job?
Has he had enough experience?
Productive last 2 years for the youngster who saw action 3 times last year and 3 more this one. Made his pro debut under the Matchroom banner, fought there once or twice, and it looked like he was going to stay there, but then he eventually migrated over to Top Rank, so here we are.
Coming off of a career-best showing over Gustavo Lemos, who was a seasoned guy with a lot of fights and a lot of rounds in the bank, gave Richardson Hitchens all he could handle at 140 pounds, but was stopped quite abruptly at 135.
Keyshawn looked sensational. So he's already been in there with a former champion in Jose Pedraza, a seasoned vet in Gustavo Lemos. What you notice about Keyshawn Davis is that even though he's only 12-0, he doesn't really have a lot of fights. Look at the kind of guys that he's been fighting, and look at how many fights those guys have. A lot more than he did going in.
That speaks to his ability, his talent level.
This fight with Dennis Berinchyk is going to be a bit different than what we just saw, though. I think it's going to be a bit more difficult. Now, Dennis has not been as productive as Keyshawn the last 2 or 3 years. Dennis only saw action once in 2022, once in 2023, and once this year. The Emmanuel Navarrete fight is the only fight that he had this year.
That was back in May. This guy's averaging 1 fight a year for the last 3 years, and he's no spring chicken. He's not getting any younger.
I anticipate that the fight between him and Keyshawn will take place sometime in the first quarter of next year. Keyshawn Davis, 25 years old, to Dennis Berinchyk, who's 36.
Going on 37.
Ahead of Keyshawn Davis's last fight, I talked about why I favored him to beat Gustavo Lemos. That boxer-puncher versus pressure fighter favors boxer-puncher, and that's what Keyshawn Davis is. This is not somebody you want to just stand in front of, shoulder square, swinging for the fences, but that's very much what Gustavo did. Is that what Dennis is going to do?
Well, Dennis is a lot more nuanced than Gustavo Lemos. He's not as simple.
He's aggressive. He's plenty aggressive, like Gustavo Lemos is aggressive, and he's prolific. He is a combination puncher, but he's got some bells and whistles that Gustavo Lemos doesn't have. He's not just a come-forward guy that's going to stand in front of you. He's going to move. He's going to cut angles, try to hit you in the blind spots. He's got a hybrid Soviet style, like what you see from Usyk, what you see from Lomachenko. He can move, he can box,
But he's not quite a boxer-puncher, and he's aggressive and likes to throw punches and bunches, but he's not quite a pressure guy. He's somewhere in between there. Though this is what Keyshawn can use against him.
his aggression.
And remember that he's 36 years old, so it's not like he's going to get faster over time or sharper.
Keyshawn has that advantage too, the advantage of youth and freshness. I figure this fight is going to be a little bit harder than the Gustavo Lemos fight. I'd be surprised if it weren't, because this guy's got a lot more to him than Gustavo.
It's not just the WBO title.
And it's not just winning one. This is the guy who just derailed Emmanuel Navarrete's bid to become a 4-division champion. This is the guy who just stifled all the momentum El Vaquero was building. So it's not simply winning a title so much as who you win it from. This is the guy that sent Emmanuel packing back down to super featherweight.
If Keyshawn can do to Dennis Berinchyk what he just did to Gustavo or something like it, I mean, if he can stop him.
Remember, Dennis is an unbeaten fighter. He's never been beaten, let alone stop. So if Keyshawn can be the first to do it, that, my friends, is a signature victory. That is a signature win.
The future.
So Keyshawn Davis has been spending a lot of time calling out Gervonta Davis, this division's WBA champion, for a fight. And I think he's barking up the wrong tree, because I don't think he's going to get it.
Nope.
But on the positive side, by calling him out, it draws attention to him in tandem with his performances.
Good press.
It will not result in a fight, though. It will not result in a unification match. And don't expect Keyshawn to fight his old buddy Shakur Stevenson, this division's WBC champion. You won't get a unification match out of them. They've sworn an oath not to fight each other.
Oh, for God's sake.
The best bet to see Keyshawn Davis in a unification match is either against Vasyl Lomachenko, who's said to be courting retirement, or whoever his belt ends up going to. A trip over to the IBF's current rank standings reveals that Russia's own Zaur Abdullaev is the highest ranked contender.
He's ranked at number 2. Keyshawn is ranked at number 3, but we know that Keyshawn is going the WBO route, so that rules him out.
Raymond Muratalla is ranked at number 4, and thus, it's conceivable that either Vasyl Lomachenko is going to fight Zaur Abdullaev in defense of his IBF title, or he's going to retire, he's going to vacate it, at which point the vacant title will be contested between Zaur Abdullaev and Raymond Muratalla.
Another top-ranked fighter.
Whoever wins that fight, which could be Raymond Muratalla, if he becomes IBF champion, now I can see Top Rank making a fight between them, between Keyshawn Davis, if he wins, and Raymond, if he wins.
Let's see what the future holds.
And finally, in men's super lightweight news, according to Chava ESPN, Teofimo Lopez has confirmed that Eddy Reynoso, Canelo Alvarez's longtime trainer, will be joining his training team alongside Lopez's father. We more or less knew this was coming.
That this is something that Teofimo wanted.
You guys know I'm not a fan of Teofimo or many of his decisions, but this is the right one, because given what his limitations have been, he stands to learn a lot from Eddy Reynoso. He stands to learn a lot from Canelo.
And so by now we know what Teofimo's shortcomings are.
Where he's weak, where he's vulnerable, and when. It's when he's coming forward. It's when he has to give chase. When he's in there with a moving target that's moving lateral and using the ring, boxing and punching, he struggles greatly with that. And we've seen it enough times at 140 pounds that this is just what the doctor ordered.
It's the guys like Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney. It's the guys like Richardson Richens or Karen Chukadzians, movers.
The guys like Suleiman Sissoko that want to box you from the outside, keep you at arm's length, and get on their bike if you get past the jab. It's those kinds of guys that give Teofimo problems, but coincidentally, it's those kinds of guys that Canelo batters. It's those kinds of guys that Canelo beats up.
That wasn't always the case. He did struggle many years ago with Erislandy Lara.
Though given everything he's accomplished since then, and everyone that he's fought, you could hardly judge Canelo as a fighter here today based on how he looked with Lara yesterday. No, he's learned to deal with that style. How?
Because he used to struggle with peer boxers.
But since that Lara fight, he has encountered quite a few. Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah, Callum Smith's not really a pure boxer, but he did try to fight like one against Canelo, trying to keep him at arm's length.
Obviously, it didn't work. What Teofimo stands to learn from Canelo is learning to effectively cut off the ring. Don't just follow the guy around. Move with him, parallel to him, and meet him in the corners to close off his exits. Cutting off the ring is one.
Catching and shooting is two. Punching out of the guard.
You can be just as effective a counterpuncher moving forward as you are hanging back when you alternate the guard. That hopefully Eddy Reynoso can break him out of that flimsy Philly shell. So many young fighters in this era trying to imitate Floyd Mayweather. So many flimsy Philly shells all over the place. You can alternate the guard depending on the opponent. Maybe you use a high guard or a mid guard for one guy and a shell for another.
Be flexible.
Malleable, adaptable. And I've noticed that's another area of weakness for Teofimo. He doesn't alternate the guard. I think he'd be better off using a high guard when he's coming forward because he's a short, stumpy guy like Canelo is a short, stumpy guy. Make yourself a small target. Even smaller.
Use that high guard so you're not getting peppered in the face as you're coming forward against what are taller fighters. We saw this change in Canelo when he moved up to super middleweight because most of the guys that he's fought up there, if not all of them, are taller than he is. Noticeably taller.
The Canelo that you saw at 154 and most of 160 was primarily a counterpuncher. That was his area of strength. But he doesn't really start transitioning to applying pressure on these guys until he gets to super middleweight because they're taller than he is, they're longer, and they try to keep him at arm's length. They try to move on him, so it's on him to close the distance. The saving grace is he knows how.
That's what Teofimo can learn.
You know that it's been about 4 or 5 years since the Lomachenko fight.
Wow.
And since then, it's been said on several occasions that Teofimo needs to make additions to his corner, that he's reached his limit with his father, and he's not going to learn anything new from him. So this is the right move.
Hopefully there's not a power struggle in the corner. You gotta let Eddy Reynoso take the reins.
Know that Teofimo's father has a penchant for trying to be the star of the show when he's supposed to be more of an NPC, just a background character. You've got to let Eddy take control if you want your son to succeed.
For the greater good.
And so, they've settled their corner situation, and they needed to. They've taken care of that. Now,
when can we expect to see him fight? Because the last we heard from him, he was trying to get away from Top Rank.
Looking for a loophole to get out of his existing contract, and I don't think it worked.
No.
They've got to situate his next opponent. Is it going to be Brian Norman? Because it was supposed to be in September.
Who's it going to be?
Is he going to stay at 140? Is he going to try to unify? Is he going to move up? That's the next thing they have to sort out, situate. Who is he going to fight? When is he going to fight? Where is he going to fight?
Is he a good student?
Because you can have the best teachers, but it counts for nothing if you don't listen, if you're a bad student.
A wealth of knowledge at your disposal is useless if you don't listen.